Hello and welcome back. This is Gabby Sparts with Luis Scott Vargas, and we're getting ready to watch Eric Froehlich versus Owen Turtenwald. Eric is on Dark Jeskai, Owen is on 4-color Rally, and like we said before, this is a win in it.
Yeah, either player is going to make top 8 if they hit 13 and 2, and we've seen these players on camera a number of times this weekend, probably because they've been winning a lot.
Indeed, and two archetypes. You know, Dark Jeskai, we haven't seen very much of that this weekend, but we have seen Eric a couple times in the feature match area, so he's representing that Is It Oreo's life. 4-color Rally a little bit more popular this weekend.
And part of it is that Owen Turtenwald, who's a member of the CFB Pantheon, and a bunch of his teammates, Reed Duke, William Jensen, Brock Parker, who's actually got, who's 12-1-1 right now, all played the 4-color Rally deck. They think the deck is great, and their results are proving that point. I mean, we have 2 of them in top 8 contention, with others with very good records.
So Eric's going to start the game with a Jace, and we see Evolving Wilds is probably one of the only decks in Standard that you see. You immediately know what you're playing against. Evolving Wilds gets a swamp for Owen.
Yeah, and both these players are well acquainted with the other players' list. They've been playing the Grand Prix all weekend. They kind of know what's going on here.
So Eiley is a draw for Owen.
And it looks like he may not have the option to play her, so he's just going to run the Zulaport Cutthroat instead.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Eiley definitely puts a more serious clock on. Eric's going to loot with that Jace.
And it doesn't look like Eric has a third land here, so he's hoping to hit a third land and play a Monastery Mentor this turn to really start pressuring Owen. Instead, he's going to have to settle for just casting a Duress.
Yeah, and discarding Crackling Doom. Let's see the options. Looks like Husk, Faithful, the Eiley, the Catacomb Sifter, Zulaport Cutthroat, and a Canopy Vista are the choices.
Which, unfortunately for Eric, mean there are no choices.
He does get information out of Owen's hand, which is a little useful, but he would have been very happy to take something like a Collected Company or a Rally right there.
Right, and that's why Duress is such a swingy card against Rally, where it takes either of their best cards, but misses on every other card.
Or you take nothing.
Yeah.
Canopy Vista is the land for Owen.
And so now he's going to play a 3-drop, whether it's Catacomb Sifter or... Well, he could play a 3-drop or he could play a 2-drop, but usually you want to play a 3, so then next turn you can play 2 2s, and it's just basic mana, so he's going to want to play a Husk or a Catacomb Sifter. So one advantage of playing Catacomb Sifter first is it protects a future Husk from a Crackling Doom, because Crackling Doom, makes you sacrifice a creature with the highest power. If he plays Husk and Eric just has another Crackling Doom, if he draws a land, then he could just lose it. So I guess he's just going to bank on Eric not hitting a third land here.
Well, how good is Crackling Doom against Rally? Can you assume that it just, if Eric discarded the first one, it's possible he doesn't have another one? It's just not a card he values here in the matchup?
It's definitely possible. It's not at its best against Rally, but right now it would be decent because Eric knows that Owen doesn't have a Rally or Company, or at least didn't as of last turn. So by killing a Husk, you take away a lot of Owen's offensive capability.
Well, it looks like Eric does not have another Crackling Doom, so that line is not available, but he might find it here with his Jace.
No, and he does have a Roast in hand, so Roast will deal with Nantuko Husk as well.
Yeah, so the Jace will flip, getting us a discard to the loot. And here we go. Rose takes care of Nantuko Husk.
Zulaport Cutthroat drains for 1, but then becomes reduced to a -1/1 because of Jace's plus ability.
Not particularly intimidating. Catacomb Sifter is the play for Owen.
And he doesn't have a 4th land, so
yeah.
He's got a bunch of creatures in his hand. He doesn't have blue mana either, so he can't cast the Sidisi's Faithful or the Reflector Mage he drew. He is going to be able to play Cutthroat and Eiley, though, when the Rally deck's doing that, it's not actually super impressive, and Eric might have an opportunity here to get a Monastery Mentor going. So Eric's really hoping Owen doesn't draw a blue source, because if Owen can go Reflector Mage, attack Jace, for 2 here because the Sifter got shrunk, that would be pretty annoying. Eric wouldn't be able to replay Mentor, but if Owen misses on blue this turn, Owen is actually thinking on his upkeep. He might sacrifice the Eldrazi Scion to scry off Catacomb Sifter, just because it's that important to hit blue mana.
That would be a very sweet play. And I think he's well aware of that, and that's why he's tanking. Yes, he's going to go ahead and do that. So sacrifice the Scion at the, it's the beginning of upkeep. It might be a good, it's probably not a blue source. Oh, it might be a blue source.
Owen may be just playing deliberately, and he actually does get a blue source here because Windswept Heath can get Prairie Stream. This was one of those scries that's pretty black or white. You either hit a land or you either hit a blue source or you don't. There's not very many cards Owen could cast that he'd want to keep on top.
Yeah, so very nice play by Owen. You know, in this case, it's a little unfortunate because he does lose that Scion, and I mean, he gets to drain a little bit, but it just ensures that his turn's going to go so much better for him.
Do you think he considered moving it to the bottom just to get value from the scry? Maybe that's what his hesitation was. He didn't want to scry for nothing, so maybe he just put it on the bottom.
Maybe I just have to ship it.
Yeah, and hope to draw a blue source anyway. Note Owen was not considering that. This does let Owen Reflector Mage, which has the dual threat of bouncing and not letting the mentor recast. Also, he has, or instead, it actually looks like he's just going to use Sidisi's Faithful to be more mana efficient.
All right, so this lets him cast 2 spells in the same turn, which is nice. That does mean that Eric can play that Monastery Mentor again, but he does still have that Reflector Mage in hand, so he will be able to bounce it eventually.
And Owen's going to be able to attack Jace for 2, taking it down to 59. People actually were speculating that are actually only 1 because of the sign. So Owen actually ignores the Jace because it's not actually he's not going to prevent it from minusing, and this way he gets to reduce Eric's life total, because with a Cutthroat in play, he's actually able to hit or threaten Eric pretty quickly, and Jace is at such a high loyalty already.
So do you think Owen's on the plan at this point where I don't care about Jace, let's just try to attack your life total and see how quickly it can clock you?
I think if Owen were able to kill Jace in like 1 turn, he probably would, or bring it down to 2 loyalty so it couldn't flash back a spell. But given where it is right now, that's not going to be that big of an issue.
So that's a nice sequence by Eric. He gets to play the Monastery Mentor again since it just got bounced with a Faithful, and Fiery Impulse is going to get him an extra, A is going to take down the Cutthroat, and B is going to get him another Monk.
Did Owen scry? I don't think he scried off his Catacomb Sifters.
I was looking at this.
Or maybe he did it really quickly, because he drew Rally, and Rally is a card he would leave on top, so it's very possible that he did.
So another Cutthroat is a play for Owen. Looks like he's going to sacrifice his Scion.
So.
He did like it.
It looks like what happened was Owen scried on top last turn from Sidisi's Faithful, so he knew the top card already. That makes sense. I was very surprised because it's just not characteristic of Owen to miss anything.
Right.
And so now Owen does get to lead with the Reflector Mage here, or rather finish with the Reflector Mage. Pressuring Eric pretty well here. Owen's putting up a steady stream of threats, and the fact that he has a Rally means that he's going to be able to finish Eric off next turn if he has a 5th land. Actually, yeah, because a 5th land would allow him to get 3 creatures back, including the Husk. So he needs to be able to rally for 3.
Yeah, so unfortunately Eric can't replay that Monastery Mentor here, which would be nice because he drew another Fiery Impulse, so he'd be able to play Mentor, get another Monk, get rid of one of Owen's creatures, but that option's not available to him. So he's going to have to string something good together here.
And it's interesting that even though Eric's deck has been very controlling this weekend, we've seen him deal with all his opponent's threats, draw a bunch of cards. In the Rally matchup, especially in Game 1 when Eric doesn't have a great way to deal with the card Rally of the Ancestors, he actually has to be the aggressive deck. He has to finish Owen off before Owen's graveyard gets too stocked, and because Eric missed a 3rd land drop, he's not really able to do that this game.
That's true with Rally in a lot of matchups in Game 1, right? You just can't let the game go too long, because if it does, they just get to have a huge Rally and just value you out. So I've heard that common thing.
Yeah,
when people play against Rally, yeah.
Where you're normally the control deck, but against Rally, you're just forced into being the aggressive deck. And that's actually a huge advantage for Rally, because it forces decks that aren't really that well suited to be aggressive in order to be aggressive, because it has the late game that trumps almost everyone.
So Eric chose to leave Fiery Impulse as the only card in this graveyard for Jace, which is nice because at this point he'll be able to, well, not currently, but he will be able to take down some of those 2/3s. Hopefully, including the Cutthroat. The Cutthroat doesn't even need another instant or sorcery in the graveyard. And he's at a low life total, Eric, so it's problematic. Cutthroat is a little scary.
Yeah, and I think Eric's going to go Soulfire Grandmaster Fiery Impulse this turn and just hope that Rally Rally the Ancestors is not a card Owen has access to.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we know Owen does have Rally in hand. The question is, does he have another land in hand?
And, you know, Eric could have used Jace to flashback Duress this turn, but, you know, he saw Owen's hand like 3 turns ago and didn't have a Rally, and I guess he's banking on Owen just not finding one, but this Rally is lethal.
Right. So Owen found an island from the top. Here comes Rally, and Eric picks up the cards. Wow, and yeah, this is what you were talking about. Eric needed to go a little bit faster, and he wasn't able to. It's difficult against 4-color Rally. You just can't really get into that late game. So taking a look at the players' sideboards, Luis, what do you think Owen's going to be bringing in against Eric?
Owen can bring in cards that react to Eric's reactive cards, which is to say Duress and Dispel, because those deal with Eric's Disdainful Strokes and potentially even Transgress the Mind, as well as Eric's Dispels. Basically, Eric has now more tools to fight the card Rally the Ancestors and the card Collected Company. And Owen kind of needs to react to that, because without those cards, the deck is a little underpowered.
Right. What about Eric? What do you think he'll do?
Eric is going to bring in Dispel and...
Which spell?
Yeah, the one that counters Rally and Collected Company. And he also has Kalidas. So Owen's actually going to be forced to bring in Murder's Cut as well if he wants to deal with Kalidas. He's got Reflector Mage, but Kalidas is such an annoying card because it stops all of Owen's death triggers. It exiles creatures instead.
Yeah, Kalidas is very strong against Rally. So now we have the game between Paul Rietzl and Chapman Sim. Once again, this is a win and in. This is a match for... Whoa. A big attack. Those Hydras were huge. I think that's enough for Paul Rietzl.
Yeah, and it looks like that was game 1, so Paul's going to fall game 1 to Obzon Falconers. And, you know, his Bant Company deck, he's been happy playing against Hardened Scales, but yeah, Obzon Falconer is still a pretty powerful card when combined with Mana Gorger Hydra X too. Owen looking to rack up another GP top 8 to add to his resume, as well as, again, to lengthen his lead. He's number 1 in Player of the Year race. You see the 1 next to his name. So if he were to top 8 or potentially win here, then he can, you know, going into the latter half of the season, have a pretty sizable edge against anyone else.
Did you see Owen shuffling? I had never seen that before.
Yeah, he
shuffles awesome.
Yeah, he does like kind of the half like
the half overhand shuffle.
Yeah, but just kind of lets the cards fall.
That was awesome. I can't do that.
Yeah, the number 1 next to Owen's name is actually represents his shuffling technique. He's well ahead of EFro in terms of shuffling.
Of shuffling techniques. Now he's not doing it anymore. Bummer.
Owen Turtenwald barely actually missed playing for what it turned out to be 9th at the last Pro Tour. In fact, he played Infect, and he played against William Jensen in a bubble. What looked like it could be a bubble match. William Jensen ended up winning and finishing 9th.
Yeah, that was tough. There was a chance, possibly, that depending on what happened depending on how the top 8 played out, that a spot opened up for Huey. Is that?
Yeah, basically
what
happened is that if Frank Lepore, who had the best tiebreakers by far, lost his match, I believe that Huey would have ended up 9th, or 8th rather, but he didn't end up 9th. So another near miss for Huey for his what would be his 5th top 8. Owen on 3 Pro Tour top 8s, and Eric Froehlich on 4. So a lot of Pro Tour top 8s here.
So the interesting thing, and the question that I think most people have been asking themselves this weekend is Hardened Scales a deck that's going to stay? I've heard a lot of talk about how this was a day 1 deck, and how people literally heard that people wanted to feel something when they wanted to play this. So,
well, part of the reason that I think the deck got played by so many people is that it's a new deck, or new-ish, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Hardened Scales did top 8 a standard GP previously, but it's a new contender in this new metagame that people like switching to the shiny new toy to some degree. I mean, I'm not saying the deck isn't also good, but decks that are new tend to see a little bit more play just because it's novel. I don't know if anyone... I mean, there's going to be one copy in the top 8, Mark Jacobson, who's actually currently 14-0. But I don't know how many people otherwise are going to make top 8 with the deck, or what the overall win percentage is going to be. My assumption, though, is that it slightly underperformed. Like if you took the lifetime win percentage of every player who played Hardened Scales in this tournament and looked at what their win percentage was with the deck, I think it'll be the second one will be lower. I think on average it was not the best choice for the tournament, but we'll have to kind of see what the numbers say afterwards.
Yeah, my understanding is that this is probably going to show up at FNM. This is going to show up locally in many ways, but it's not necessarily the most consistent deck, and maybe underperformed a little bit given the amount of people who were playing this deck and how excellent players they are.
Yeah, I do think it's a good deck, and I don't think it's necessarily the best deck, and just a lot of people played it. So Eric had a pretty slow start this game. He did have entered a battlefield tap land on turns 1 and 2, which means not able to play as Jace, and might be a step behind Owen because Owen's going to kick things off here.
No one's going to get a Jace, so he's off to a decent start right here relative to Eric, but that Jace is going to meet a fiery impulse very quickly, and it's dead. So he did MICL his mana. That actually turned out pretty good for Eric. Yeah,
when you're able to play just 2 tap lands, but then play a 1-drop on turn 2, then you treated your turn 2 for their turn 2, and then that's not a bad deal, especially when Eric followed up with Painful Truths, which is a card that's been doing a lot of work for him this weekend. He just played the full 4 in his main deck.
Yeah, so Painful Truths for Eric. Pretty nice way to refuel his hand. Takes a little bit of pain, but right now his life is under no pressure.
Yeah, and the 2 cards in Eric's graveyard are really the combo of the deck. Fire Impulse, Painful Truths. The reason that's a combo is that a 1-mana spell that kills usually a 2 or 3 mana spell, and then a 3-mana spell that draws you a bunch of cards, they synergize really, really well, just because you're able to clear the board and then refuel your hand.
And Tuka Husk is a play for Owen and a pass back to Eric.
An unprotected Husk is something that you don't mind seeing if you're Eric, especially since another Fiery Impulse will handle it, but Eric's going to try to clear the way with Duress here.
So this time Duress is going to be able to take something relevant. A couple of options for Eric: Collected Company, Murderous Cut, and the rest are creatures. But I mean, you're happy if you see this in your Eric, right?
Yeah, this isn't bad for you. Both players are actually a little light on lands. You see Owen doesn't have the 4th in his hand, and Eric doesn't either. So Eric could get greedy and just take the Murderous Cut and not take Collected Company, hope Owen doesn't draw a land.
How bad is it if that actually happens, though?
Well, it depends on what Eric's plays are. Eric has his own Murderous Cut and Disdainful Stroke and Transgress the Mind, so he's got a lot of options. I think this game is going to go long enough. I like taking Collected Company with either Duress or Transgress here. Eric also has multiple copies of Jace. It might be worth it for him to play Jace. One advantage of playing Jace this turn is if Owen misses a land, if Owen wants to cast Murderous Cut, Owen can't cast any of his 3-drops. It is unfortunate for Eric, though, if he played a Jace and Owen drew a land, so.
Yeah, so Eric's going to transgress Owen and take care of that Reflector Mage. That Reflector Mage is gone now. The nice thing, too, is because it's exiled, it's not really going to matter if at any point Owen gets a Rally the Ancestors.
Yeah, and Transgress, another card that, plays a lot of roles. It's good against control decks, it's good against ramp decks, and it's good against Rally.
So Owen's going to crunch in for 2 and then play a follow-up Jace.
So Eric could play Kalidas here, but he knows Owen has a Murderous Cut, so that's a little less appealing. Also, if Jace lives, it helps Owen find a 4th land and can let Owen flashback Collected Company, so Eric has a pretty big incentive to kill Jace with Murderous Cut.
Does he have a cut of his own, Eric?
Yeah.
All right. So Eric's going to crack the Polluted Delta. I do agree with that. I think the flip Jace is pretty threatening on this board in particular, so it seems very appealing to take care of it now. Can he play anything else in his hand right now if he cuts? Because he has enough to cut for 1.
Yeah, Eric has a bunch of 2-drops in his hand too, so he can go like Murderous Cut for 2, play a 2-drop. There's no reason to overdelve here. And an advantage of casting Murderous Cut now is, and we've seen this all day, is you kill the creature on your turn so the Husk isn't big on your opponent's turn.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Owen finds an Elvish Visionary for his turn. He doesn't have another land, so he might be incentivized to play that and hopefully make a land drop.
Yeah, I think that's a good play because Owen knows that just playing a 3-drop every turn is really just not going to get the job done. Also, Owen wants to cast Murderous Cut. He's in the same position as EFro. If Jace untaps, then your opponent gets to play a good spell. But Eric knew about the Murderous Cut. Owen has to know that, so it's kind of a balance. Like, he knows what Eric knows, so if Eric had no other creatures, then maybe the Jace wouldn't have been that appealing, but there's a decent chance Eric has something else. I don't know if Owen can bank on that though. Like even if he knew Eric had another Jace in hand, then he might cast this Murderous Cut. If he knew Eric had Kalidas in hand, I think he'd be a little less inclined to.
Well, Owen was able to find a polluted Delta from that Elvish Visionary, so he cracks it and gets a Sunken Hollow. He's almost online with all his colors. He would like another Plains for Rally the Ancestors, but his hand is unlocked.
And Owen's on 4 land is going to have 2 3-drops in hand if he casts Murderous Cut here, which it seems like he's going to. Which means that he doesn't really have too much hope of playing multiple spells in the same turn over the next couple turns.
Eric flips his deck around. That sometimes happens when you draw and the card is in the wrong order.
So Eric's got basically 3 different lines here. One is play Jason Soulfire Grandmaster, which is the lowest risk, lowest reward line. Kalidas is the highest risk, highest reward line. He knows Owen's hand, though. He knows it's a Grim Haruspex and a Husk. So if Owen misses on Reflector Mage, DC's Faithful, or Murderous Cut, playing the Kalidas works out by far the best.
Yeah, so Owen's going to crunch in with a Nantuka Husk. Aaron's just going to take 2, putting him down a 10. And now Owen can't do anything about the Kalidas, and he knows Eric's about to untap with a lot of removal.
Yeah, it's always frightening when your opponent untaps with Kalidas. And you know, that's kind of Eric's deck, right? He's got Monastery Mentor and Kalidas. They're both great cards if you untap with them. As it turns out, Eric doesn't have a removal spell in hand to back that up, but he's still may be able to find one if he casts something like Painful Truths. It looks like he's actually just going to go Soulfire Grandmaster and leave up Disdainful Stroke and Dispel. And if you're Eric, oh wow, that was a huge draw. Reflector Mage is one of the few cards Eric can't counter that are really, really relevant. Bouncing Kalidas means that Eric's going to be set back multiple turns here, and then even though Owen can block with Soulfire Grandmaster here, it's so much less appealing than when you had a Kalidas in play.
Yeah, and so Owen here is going to sack that Elvish Visionary, make that Nantuka Husk a 4/4. Eric gains 2 life there, so he's actually net nothing, but now he has no board, and Owen's looking pretty good right here.
Yeah, and Eric can't recast Kalidas this turn because of the Reflector Mage, and his play of just Jace land here is just not that impressive.
He does get to hold up Disdainful Stroke, so not too shabby, but you know, at this point he also knows that Owen doesn't have, or he could have drawn, but has currently not played.
So Owen is going to get to play 2 creatures this turn. He might be able to go for lethal because one of them is going to be a Cutthroat. So if one Husk gets blocked, yeah, Eric has enough to go for lethal. Owen has enough to go for lethal. He has to worry if Eric has another Murderous Cut, though.
Do you think you go for it if you're
Well,
Owen?
one of the reasons to go for it, one of the upsides, is you have a Grim Haruspex in play, so every creature you sacrifice draws you a card. So if you sacrifice Husk to Husk, Husk becomes a 4/4. You're dealing 6, and Duzuport Cutthroat drains Eric for 1. That puts Eric to 3, and you end up with Husk and 4 creatures in play. So all you have to do is sacrifice the blocked Husk, and you're going for it in a way that's pretty safe. You're not really risking a whole lot. So, looks like Eric is actually going to lose this game thanks to that top deck Reflector Mage. If Owen didn't draw the Reflector Mage, then Eric would have been in really good shape this game. But Reflector Mage is a really big upgrade to Rally.
Yeah, no one's thinking about it right now. Definitely considering he could go for the winning line. And obviously we know that Eric doesn't have anything to respond here, but Owen doesn't.
Yeah, and it looks like Owen might be playing a little more conservatively. He's going to sack the Cutthroat, so it drops Eric down to 9. Owen draws a card. And then Eric right now has 6 points of unblocked damage. So he can also sacrifice. He can just deal the 6, put Eric down to 3, and then he no longer has instant lethal because the Cutthroat's not in play anymore. But he draw a bunch of cards if Eric does anything. He could also sacrifice the other Husk and then the Haruspex to go for it, but that's a lot riskier. So my guess is Owen just lets Eric fall to 3 and just passes with 4 creatures in play.
Well, Owen found a copy of Reflector Mage. That was the card he drew of the Haruspex.
That means that even though Owen doesn't win this turn, he's in a really good spot. Like it's going to be difficult for Eric to win the game because Eric's hand is essentially blank. He can play Kalidas, but that isn't going to stop a lethal Nantuko Husk, and Eric really needed to draw an instant speed removal spell.
Well, I think he's going to go for the only play he really can make, which is play Kalidas. But we know, unfortunately, for this, it means game.
Oh, Owen just drew a Duress, which is actually just the best card to draw, because he just now knows that Eric doesn't have anything. So you can choose a card at random, play Reflector Mage.
Yeah, there you go. So he just scoops.
Lethal.
Wow.
So Owen takes it, advances to 13-2, and we'll have a spot in the top 8.
Yeah. So Owen, or we think Owen is definitely in with this. We still have a couple of other matches that are ongoing right now. All of them also probably playing for win and in. Paul Rietzl versus Chapman Sim is in the same situation that Eric and Owen are in.
Except the Reflector Mage is on the left side of the table instead of the right side.
We did the switcheroo. So we have Collected Company, Band Company versus Hardened Scales, a matchup that we've seen many times this weekend. Things are looking pretty good for Paul.
Yeah, he just got to bounce a hanger back, shrink Endless One into a 1-3, and just start clocking in with Reflector Mages. It looks like Chapman may have double hanger back in hand. It always feels so unfair when your opponent Reflector Mage is one of your creatures, you just have a second copy.
Yes. Feels like cheating a little bit.
If you Reflector Mage a nameless one, do you think they should be able to play a different nameless one? Because the creature doesn't have a name, so therefore Reflector Mage's text shouldn't apply.
Oh no, Chapman Sim is in a really tough situation right here with with Jay still being able to take down the Endless One. He can't really block these Reflector Mages too well.
And this is when Lumbering Fall starts to, pay some dividends here. Chapman can block one of the 2/3s, but he's still taking 7 a turn. Jace just functioning as a way to make it so you can attack into the 3/3.
And it looks like Paul had to work through a couple of things. I see a Mana Gorger Hydra and a Dromoka's Command in the yard, and he's at 11, so it seems like that Hydra maybe got in for a couple points of damage earlier, but at some point it was taken down by that stand. So it looks like Paul definitely turned the corner and is firmly in control of this game right now.
Though Chapman is going to be able to play 2 hangerbacks next turn. Presumably one is a 2/2 and one is a 1/1, which does buy a lot of time. Hangerback Walker is great at chump blocking. Paul, what spells does he have access to? He has his one of Harbinger of the Tides in the graveyard, which is a nice addition. But in terms of actual spells, it looks like all he's got is Valorous Stance. So being able to cast Valorous Stance is something that it hasn't come up for a few turns. Chapman looks like he drew a Dromoka's Command, which gives him the option of killing one of the Reflector Mages at the very least.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the Jace on the board, it's still not going to be able to kill any of the other Reflector Mages. It'll be able to block it just fine, but it was able to block it before. Yeah, so it looks like a copy of Hangerback Walker, a Dromoka's Command, and maybe 2 lands in play for Chapman.
Yeah, and it looks, and this is playing a Hangerback for 2 lets you use command. You can kill a Reflector Mage right now and end up with a Hangerback with 3 counters on it, which is really hard to get through.
So that's exactly what he's going to do. That Hangerback goes up to 3, is able to take down one of those Reflector Mages, and Paul no longer has good attacks here anymore.
So Paul needs to, well, clearly drawing like a Collected Company would be awesome, but even drawing like a Bounding Crassus or the 4th Reflector Mage would be very effective.
You said you saw Harbinger of the Tides is somewhere in the yard?
Yeah, it's at the 3rd card down there.
It's a one of in the sideboard for Paul Rietzl, but it's a good one, especially against Hardened Scales.
It's like a 5th Reflector Mage against a deck that bounce spells are very effective against.
So let's see what Paul's able to string together here. That turn was very good for Chapman.
Paul doing a good job of concealing his draw steps. He does have a Prairie Stream in play.
You mean in hand?
Or in hand, rather.
So Jace can flashback things from the yard at this point. Is there anything in his graveyard that he might be interested in doing that
There's
with?
a Valorous Stance, which currently doesn't have any targets that can kill. And that looks like about it. So
Chapman, Chapman's actually okay if that Hangerback Walker gets stance at any point, so he's not going to be worried about taking him up potentially. But
do you think this game's going to come down to a Jace Ultimate?
A Jace Ultimate? Not many games come down to a Jace Ultimate, but it certainly could.
That's a much more charitable answer than Marshall gives me. Every time I brought it up this week, and he just said no.
He's like, no.
and then he moves on.
Does he just give you a death stare he doesn't even acknowledge? He's like, no.
Well, he does answer. It's just in the negative. So Jace is at 9. Technically called Ultimate. I do want to point that out. But milling for 5 a spell is not likely to end this game.
So Lumbering Falls is going to rumble.
So Paul is willing to trade Lumbering Falls for a Hangerback Walker, or really at this point kill the Hangerback or trade it for an Endless One here. So Chapman can get 3 tokens out of the Hangerback. That would help. But if he just trades off the Endless One, he stays at 7, the next turn can play another big Hangerback Walker and then start pumping the Hangerback he has in play. That sounds pretty appealing to me.
I guess that's more appealing for Chapman if he has any way to pump up his team, but unfortunately right now he doesn't. So
yeah,
go ahead.
It looks like he's just going to cash in the Hangerback. It was a 1/3 because of Jace. He does get the 3 tokens. It always feels bad when you have to kill your opponent's gigantic Hangerback, but sometimes you don't really have an option.
So Chapman draws Avatar the Resolute.
So he can play a Hangerback for 3 here and still play an Avatar of the Resolute, which would then be a 5/4. Yeah, Chapman's getting control of this game. Paul's going to need to top deck something to get his offense going again.
Yeah, so here's a Hangerback for 3. And the Avatar comes in with 2 counters, making it a 5/4. Thopters are going to rumble.
And looks like Chapman isn't even concerned about the Jace Ultimate. He's just letting it sit there. Do you think he knows that Jace's Ultimate only costs 9?
How many games would you say you finished thanks to a Jace Ultimate?
Like 2 lifetime, so not very many.
So not many?
And I like Chapman's play. I think going for Paul's life total, like Paul's at 10 and Jace is at 10, so you'd rather just deal 10 to Paul. It doesn't always work out quite that cleanly, but I think it is worth it.
Yeah, so Paul's gonna no longer in ultimate range, gonna flashback the Valorant stance and take care of the Avatar of the Resolute. Unfortunately, Paul still needs to deal with all these Thopters. He has no way to block them right now.
And he has no real way to attack. Chapman's got a pair of 3/3s that keep those Reflector Mages at bay.
And the Hangerback, which is growing. Another Avatar is a follow-up for Chapman.
Paul really hoping that he has a Collected Company in turn. He has a Bounding Crisis. That could lead to something. He has lethal, or close to lethal in play. So Crisis was actually a great draw. Because now he's got 4 attackers if he animates Lumbering Falls. And Chapman's going to have 2 blockers. So Paul doesn't have enough to push through, but if Paul has enough mana, or if he draws a Reflector Mage, I think he does end up winning. Yeah, he's exactly enough. So Paul needs to draw another Bounding Crisis or a Reflector Mage, and then he actually has this game.
Did you get a peek at that?
I didn't. I think Paul did, though.
I actually think he did.
And Paul has done the math. He's trying to figure out if he drew an interactive spell, then that presumably is enough. If he didn't, he doesn't have great attacks though, because the Avatar is big enough to eat any of Paul's creatures. Also, if Paul goes all in, then Chapman just has lethal on the way back. But this is, I think, the last turn Paul really has a great shot of doing this. Obviously, Bant Company could just draw the card Collected Company and then hit multiple creatures that affect the board, but this is the turn where any individual creature would potentially be good enough.
I wonder what Paul drew, because we're at the point where we have hands on his head. This is a difficult decision. It's that moment of the game. And the stakes are high.
Well, the good part for Paul is Chapman has no cards in hand. You don't have to play around anything. You have all the information you need. The bad part is having all that information might mean he knows that he's not going to win this turn.
Indeed, and Paul needs to even it out here. Otherwise, Chapman's immediately going to be locked in for top 8.
Oh, wow. Chapman points out, too. Land actually does it, too, right? Is that accurate?
To animate both falls?
No, he's not actually.
He can't.
Yeah, he's too short of that.
Like, he could animate it with the other Lumbering Falls, but then one of them's just not attacking.
That's not a great play. I would not advise that. Okay, so
Jace takes up and targets the Endless
So
One.
if Paul drew a random blocker, if he attacks with everything here, okay, so it looks like Paul is content, essentially chump attacking into the Avatar, potentially either forcing the chump block of an Endless One. So you either trade a creature for an Endless One, or you drop Chapman to 4. So not the exciting turn Paul was hoping for, but it's better than nothing.
So with 3 mana there, Paul representing something like Bounding Crisis, but If that were true, then he would have just gone for the win right here.
Right. So what Paul could be representing here is just a creature like, a Den Protector or a Death Mist Raptor. Some other creature that doesn't actually remove a blocker that could give him a chance of winning. Because if he doesn't have any other creatures, then Chapman could potentially win by just blocking the Abandoned Grixis with Avatar and then taking 3, falling to 4, and then just attacking back with everything. So, yeah, I think Paul's in a tough spot here.
Yeah, no, well, it's interesting because Chapman has to assume that it's not another Grixis, right? So if that's the case, you just want to make sure you don't die here. You have the inevitability from the Thopters, so... But Paul is at 4, so the Thopters aren't lethal on the way back. I think he agrees with your play.
And you also really don't want to block Lumbering Falls, or you don't want to kill Lumbering Falls, because Paul has so many backup Lumbering Falls and he can't activate all of them. So killing the 3/3 that doesn't cost 4 mana to activate is a lot better. Chapman pretty deep in the tank here. There's no pump spell Paul could have. I guess he could have a Dromoka's Command. That would be an instant speed of interaction. So what does that do? That lets you put a +1/+1 counter on the Bounding Grixis, maybe kill a flyer, and then you trade for the Avatar. Chapman falls to 4. Still has a big hangerback walker, which is unfortunate, but that does deal with some threats.
Yeah, so he decides that those are his blocks.
Looks like he did not have a Dromoka's Command.
Paul throws away that Bounding Grixis, but it does put Chapman down to 4. So let's see what Chapman can do right here.
I think Chapman just attacks with everything.
Well, he has lethal if he attacks with everything. He just wants to make sure he doesn't die on the way back. But, he knows it's not Grixis, and what else could it be? Is it Dromoka's Command? How bad is it for you if it's Dromoka's Command right here? You can't really take anything down other than the Thopter.
It couldn't actually be Dromoka's Command, actually, because it would have been like a Reflector Mage or Bounding Grixis, which would have...
Oh, in the last turn?
Which would have killed the Endless one and let Paul attack for lethal. So
yeah, that makes sense.
There really aren't that many cards that Paul could have that would prevent this from being lethal. So if you're Chapman, I think you just have to conclude that Paul doesn't have one of those cards.
Yeah, but he wants to be careful. He wants to make sure this is high stakes. He's playing for the top 8, and he doesn't want to, you don't want to be in this spot and then attack foolishly and then forget about some card that could have blown you out. So he's being very deliberate.
Counterpoint, what if you just attack with everything and just hope it works?
Is that your legitimate advice? The next level coverage advice?
Yeah. I do like attacking with everything. That is advice I frequently dispense. But I agree that Chapman should try to make sure. So Chapman, one thing that's giving him a lot of information is if Paul had a way to clear a blocker, Paul would have won.
Right.
So Paul can't have that. So given that, what could Paul have? Like some kind of fog, some kind of gain 7 life, like that. Those are just
the Pulse of Marasa right there.
Wow, this actually would be a pretty sick Pulse of Marasa. That seems so unlikely.
Yeah.
And given that,
stranger things have happened.
Yeah. And Paul does not, in fact, have Pulse of Marasa in his sideboard. So given that, I think just attacking with everything, it seems pretty good.
So Chapman's going to take the conservative line.
He's attacking Paul down to 1, and then playing a giant endless one. This gives Paul a potential very, very slim chance of victory. Is that accurate?
He would be able to. He would need to
clear 4 blockers.
Yeah, clear a lot of blockers. No, I don't think he can he? Could he collected company and then animate a Lumbering Falls, and if he finds 2, like a Tapper and a Bouncer?
What if he goes collected company, hit the last Reflector Mage, Bounding Grixis, use Jay's flashback, collected company, hit 2 more Bounding Grixis? I don't think I need a high RPG metric calculator to know that's a very low percentage. Even Paul's, buying himself another turn by just putting the fear into Chapman. That's just not going to work again. Chapman's going to attack with the 1/1 flyers.
Well, Chapman's going with a conservative line, but I think, he, like you said, he's just in a very good spot right here. So Paul's going to shrink down one of the Thopters, but this is kind of a Hail Mary at this point. Let's see what he can string together. Jace. And a pass.
Yeah, as long as Chapman attacks with 2 of the 1/1 flyers. Oh.
Collected company on his upkeep.
All right, let's see what Paul can hit here.
No.
He found the
double Grixis. What were you saying were the odds on that?
Well, the thing is, he needs 4 of them to win last turn, so now he's going to tap down the 2 Thopters that are not.
Oh, one of them is not tapped.
Yeah,
indeed.
but it's a one
But
with negative 1 power.
it is a useless Thopter, indeed.
This all of a sudden got interesting. So what does Chapman have? Does he have a Nissa, as it looks like?
Is that what he drew?
Well, he tapped 3 really quickly, so if he has a Nissa, he can attack with those 4 creatures. The main thing to worry about is the Avatar is going to be a 6-power Trampler, so Paul has to block with 2 creatures and then go chump, chump, chump. And then if Chapman doesn't attack with the Thopter token, because it wouldn't actually deal lethal, then Paul has to animate Lumbering Falls and then flashback Collected Company and hit a Reflector Mage. But then Lumbering Falls is still not enough. You need to hit Reflector Mage plus Sylvan Advocate to make the Lumbering Falls into a 5/5. You know, something insane could happen here. It's not.
Hey, this game looked like it was about to be done a couple turns ago, and we just hit, or rather, Paul hit Grixis.
Oh.
So
Chapman drew High Sentinels of Arashin.
Oh.
So he can put +1/+1 counters on anything. He's not quite enough mana to make that deal lethal with the Thopter token, but this is a gigantic flyer. He's got 4 creatures with counters in play right now. So it's like a 7/8 flyer. You can pay 4 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on anything.
That's the thing, though. Right now, Chapman knows if he. Oh wow. What do you think of this attack all?
I think that's lethal. Well, no, sorry, it's 1 short of lethal. Because the Avatar essentially has a 6 power. So yeah, Paul has to just double block Avatar. Block, 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 block. Everything dies. Paul needs to flashback Collected Company, draw land, flashback Collected Company into. Oh, he can't remove 2 blockers. Yeah.
Well, he's dealing with all the Thopters that are tapped for this turn, but not tapped next turn. So
yeah. So, activate High Sentinels.
yeah, so everything dies in this exchange.
Well, everything except Reflector Mage. Actually, that gives Paul an out. It's again a very slim one, but it's draw land, flashback Collected Company, hit 2 copies of Reflector Mage / Grixis in the 1 Reflector Mage, 1 Grixis you have left. Hit the last copy of either of them, and then attack for lethal with Lumbering Falls plus Reflector Mage. I'm not saying he's got a big chance.
Never say never.
Oh, he drew a Collected Company.
All right.
So he can double Collected Company, but I don't see how this Reflector Mage can deal lethal now. And Paul, he can he, if he has a Yasova Dragonclaw, is there outs involving Yasova Dragonclaw? He hit a Bounding
He hit
Crisis.
one of the Bounding Crisis. But now there's a Thopter still left behind. So we're going to see a flashback of the second Collected Company.
And Paul doesn't have quite enough to attack with. He's got a Reflector Mage, so he's going to be 2 points short. Oh wow, that was an insane game.
That was crazy. That game certainly looked like it was about to be over. Chapman had a window where he could have gone for lethal, decided to go with a more conservative route, and Paul was doing flips, back flips, and then trying to stay alive in that game, but in the end it wasn't enough. So let's take a look at Daniel Ward versus Amir Radmard. Once again, we think this is a play, and it's to match for the top 8. It looks like both players are even currently. And lots has happened in this game. There's a lot of cards in the graveyard so far.
Yeah, and Painful Truths giving Daniel Ward a bunch more options here. He's playing a Grixis Dragons list. See if it's slightly different or not from the other Grixis Dragons list that we saw from Cody Lingelbach.
Take a look. Here's
and
Amir.
It is. This is a more controlling version, and there aren't any of the colorless creatures, but this has, Kalidas, Trader of Get, more removal like Kolagon's Command and Murderous Cut, as well as Foul Tongue Invocation. So this is definitely a removal heavy, dragon heavy list.
So Thunderbreak Region is the play for Daniel. Kind of awkward bouncing things like Thunderbreak Region. You have to take damage to do it too.
And also of note, Brock Parker did win, so he is now 13-1-1, and Mark Jacobson falls to 14-1.
That does lock both Mark and Brock for the top 8.
Correct, and Mark Jacobson was also locked at #1 seed, which he was going into the round.
Unfortunately, if Mark lost this round, he will not be able to maybe have the dream of going 18-0 at a Grand Prix.
I think he'll have to settle for a top 8. So, this is a Bant collected company list, but it's actually more than Bant. This is 4-color, no black. So of the 4-color combinations, you see, Savage Knuckleblade, one of the underused, I would say, standard, gems, I suppose, where Savage Knuckleblade is getting haste here and trading for a Thunderbreak. That actually looks pretty good, for all the crap that Savage Knuckleblade gets. it did some good work there.
Yeah, I would not be upset about trading a Savage Knuckleblade for a Thunderbreak Regent. Rose is going to take care of that Jace for Amir, and that's nice for Daniel too. He gets to make sure that this collected company doesn't come back from the graveyard at this point.
And he's well ahead here.
Oh.
He gets to play a Kolaghan's the Stormfury, not dash it, which is also kind of rare. And Amir's now got a Reflector Mage and no cards in hand except for the one he just drew.
Well, he didn't play it, so the path is somewhat clear right now for Kolaghan. Foul Tongue Invocation. This puts Daniel up to 11, which is nice. His life total was a little... 10.
I'm feeling danger here. Are we dashing a second Kolaghan? Is that what's happening right now? Or no, it's hopefully a Wandering Fumarole activation. Okay, no, it's a Transgress.
It's a Transgress.
Good. I just saw him fetching for the 5th land. I didn't think Daniel was going to do that. He's played Red Black Dragons. He played it at Grand Prix San Diego earlier this year and did quite well with it there. So I'm pretty sure that it is not going to happen in his hands, but I have seen it happen before.
Yeah, that would be very unfortunate. Looming Spires for Amir. Daniel just gets to crunch in with Kolaghan. Disdainful Double, Disdainful Stroke in hand. Doesn't really do very much against this dragon that's currently on the battlefield.
And Amir down to 1 now against a Kolaghan. Oh, there's a Reflector Mage that'll stop both Kolaghans. Though, at this point, Daniel can go in for lethal with Wandering Fumarole if he goes for it.
So Kolaghan back in hand.
Except, the Reflector Mage will be able to block. So it looks like Daniel might have to wait a turn. He's on all Kolaghans right now.
Does he have 3?
He's got 2
no, he's got 2
land.
at least, yeah.
But I think he's still in really good shape here. Amir does have Disdainful Stroke, and
he just drew a Collected Company.
This game could turn around. So Reflector Mage bounced Kolaghan, prevented it from being recast, prevented the other Kolaghan from being recast. Amir can't really attack into Wandering Fumarole, which is hiding in Dan's land pile. He just has a bunch of lands in play. One of them is the 1/4 land that could turn into the 4/1. It looks like Amir is going to go for main phase Collected Company. And the reason that he keeps doing this is that he does have those Savage Knuckleblades, which he can give haste if he hits.
So that's exactly what he's going to do. Collected Company for Amir. Let's see if we find any of those Savage Knuckleblades. Mantis Rider.
He's also got Mantis Rider, speaking of hasted creatures. Bounding Grixis with no good targets.
Still a 3/3. And his board's looking so much better now. He was so close to being dead a second ago. So Mantis Rider's going to get in, putting Daniel down to 7.
Does Daniel have enough mana to cast both of his Kolaghans? I think if he sacrifices his fetch lands, he does. But he might be. Yeah, it looks like he's gonna lead with a Kolaghan here. He's picking out 5, and Daniel's in a good play here by not sacrificing the fetch lands. A lot of people just sacrifice their fetches just to thin their deck, which it does do that, but it doesn't thin it that much. If you're worried about overall not hitting enough, or if you're worried about your life total and you don't need the mana, you can often just leave them uncracked, which is what Daniel has done.
Do you think there's a chance that he will crack him at this point just to be able to play the second Kolaghan?
Well, because he's leading with Dig Through Time, he actually can't cast both Kolaghans, and Amir's in a tough spot. He could cast Disdainful Stroke. He could counter Dig Through Time, but he knows there's a Kolaghan coming, so he might not want to do that.
Well, he's just in a position where he can't. I mean, he would have to chump it with a Mantis Rider, and that's definitely not what he wants to do, so.
So he is going to counter the Dig Through Time.
Oh, there you go.
So what that lets Daniel do is Daniel now gets to dash in Kolaghan. He could eat the Mantis Rider, and then next turn Amir would get to attack back with the Needle Spider, so that actually doesn't work. I think Daniel might be in some trouble here.
I think that's why Amir countered that Dig Through Time. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And Daniel doesn't have enough mana to activate Kolaghan or activate the Wandering Fumarole and block with Kolaghan. So Actually, I think Amir just wins this. Because Amir has now 4 attackers, and Daniel can put in 1 blocker no matter what he does. Whether it's leave up Fumarole, dash Kolagon, play Kolagon, and pass. No matter what, he blocks 1 creature, and the rest come in for lethal.
Would it have been better for Daniel to try to play... Does he have enough mana to try to play both Kolagons?
So if he had tapped 5 to play Kolagon, Amir would have almost assuredly countered it. And then if Daniel played the second one, it would have been in the same position as now. So leading with Dig did work out better for Daniel, but either
it's still
way,
not working out great.
yeah, as it turns out, Amir had exactly enough between drawing Reflector Mage into drawing Collected Company to take this game. And Daniel just has to hope Amir doesn't go for it. Amir's in the spot where I don't think you can afford to not go for it. So, because if Daniel had a removal spell, he would just kill the Mantis Rider and attack for lethal.
Right.
So you can just kind of conclude he doesn't have a way to kill one of your creatures.
Right, so Daniel here deep in the tank, but really only has one option, which is Kolagon the Storm's Fury.
You know, there were turns early in this game where Daniel could have attacked with 1 Fumarole, but he didn't want to sacrifice a bunch of fetch lands. So it's possible that, you know, had he done that, he might have been able to force things through.
Did you see that draw, Luis?
I did.
It was a Bounding Crisis.
So, though that basically, since that cuts Amir off from activating Needle Spires, is not significantly different, but he might as well go for it this way.
And develops his board. Always be developing.
That'll
there you
do
go.
it. Wow, that was quite the comeback.
Yes, it was.
I did not think Amir was winning that game. He was facing down 2 copies of Kolagon with no board, no cards in hand.
Yes.
But yeah, Collected Company. There's a reason there are going to be a lot of Collected Companies in the top 8, and I think we're adding 4 more with the results of this match.
Collected Company is an incredibly strong card. We've seen it all over the place, except I guess for the Hardened Scale stacks. A lot of people were actually asking that in chat. I saw if they were playing Collected Company, but they're not. In any event, most of our matches are coming to an end. We're starting to see who will be in the top 8. We know for sure that Mark and Brock are both in.
As well as Owen Turtenwald.
Yeah. And Chapman. We know that we think that those 4 are most likely locked in.
Joint.
And that'll do it for round 15 from Grand